Hello, my fellow librarian, Sean, one of your co-hosts here. Thank you so much for listening to these first few episodes of the Eternal Library. We are so thankful to you and to the Lord for all the feedback and encouragement we've already received on the show and can't wait to see what he continues to do with and through it. I just wanted to let you guys know about our email list that is now live. This is how we're going to send out updates and info on the show. If you sign up, you'll get a monthly newsletter with exclusive behind-the-scenes content. You'll get the opportunity to submit questions about books we've already covered that Daniel and I will answer at the top of each episode. You'll also get to suggest books you'd like to see covered in future episodes. And as a bonus for signing up, you'll get a specially curated list of Daniel and I's favorite books for you to dig in and explore on your own. What else could a person ask or dream of? There's a lot of great stuff going on here at the Eternal Library. A lot of great episodes coming your way. You just need your library card, aka your email address, to get in and get past the stuffy librarian and join us all the way in the back as we dig and explore more of the great works of literature that have been produced here in God's great big beautiful world. So the link will be in the description of all the episodes moving forward. So sign up today, and now enjoy this episode of The Eternal Library. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. If, by Rudyard Kipling. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode number 2 of The Eternal Library with Sean and Dan. I'm one of your hosts, Sean Malarkey, and I'm joined by
And I'm Daniel Moran.
And he beat me to the punch.
Yeah.
He didn't want me.
You're not getting past this
He
one.
didn't want me coming up with a bunch of new adjectives.
Yeah, we're joined today by Sean Malarkey.
And I'm joined by Sean Malarkey. Daniel, how you doing? How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day, and it's a beautiful day in the Eternal Library.
It is a beautiful day in the Eternal Library. Indeed, it's a beautiful day in the Lord's kingdom as well.
It's in the kingdom.
We're not going to get into that national today right now because we got more important things to talk about right now. Yeah. But it is a very beautiful day. The sun is shining. We're in my bedroom here in beautiful, sunny Studio City, California.
We're in the studio.
We're in the studio in Studio City, which is my bedroom. This is where it all happens. This is where all the most important things happen. Daniel, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing very well, and I'm very happy today to discuss one of my favorite books with my friend Sean.
Oh yeah, we got a good book for you guys today. So just a reminder of what we're doing here. We are a couple of Christian bros, couple of homies in the Lord who are just love reading, love literature, and we want to just give the church the tools to enjoy good stories, delight in good stories for the glory of God, to discern the good, true, and the beautiful in each story that you may come across. Yeah, so if you are curious on more details of what that looks like, see our published works, refer to episode 1.
Follow our thread
Follow our thread.
I
Yeah,
don't
be
know.
sure to give us a like and subscribe.
Yeah.
We have
Give us money.
give it.
I'm just kidding. Just kidding about the money part.
I mean, maybe at some point, maybe if you want to give a little, give a little, give a little donation to the cause. Dan, before we go on and get into the book itself, I feel like there's something we forgot to do in the first episode, and that is there's a few people who I think I got to give a shout out to.
Oh, it's shout out time.
Shout out time, ladies and gentlemen. We got to shout out our dear friend Nate Sarantino, who contributed all the equipment we're using for this podcast.
Nate Sarantino is a good man.
He is a great man, loves the Lord, loves the brethren, and he just gave us a bunch of equipment.
This equipment courtesy from Nate Sarantino.
This equipment, this podcast brought to you by Nate Sarantino. So Nate, I'm sure you're listening. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you. We also got to shout out our other dear brother, Steve Frost, who is
Steve Frost, Frosty,
the Steve man, who is officially our first patron to the podcast. He contributed a little something to help us get this thing off the ground.
He's the paterfamilias.
Yeah, he's the godfather. He's the god. And he was there over many nights as we kind of spitballed ideas for this over some food or at our local watering hole, the Thirsty Merchant. Shout out to the Thirsty Merchant as well, where the idea was conceptualized. But Steve was there with us many nights as we kind of talked about books and talked about the idea behind this podcast, and has been very encouraging and has offered a lot of great ideas of his own and actually contributed a lot to coming up with the name for the podcast as well. We also got to shout out my dear friend and roommate, Sam Vest.
Sam Vest Studios.
Sam Vest Studios. If you're looking for quality media content of any sort, we're talking like voiceover work, we're talking animation, we're talking film, video, audio projects. Sam Vest is your guy for that. And he's also a very dear friend, a brother in the Lord. He's also my roommate. I share a wall with him. And when we were recording the first episode, he
broke through it.
He busted through it like a and said, "Oh yeah." No, but he helped us kind of figure out the equipment and gave us some technical advice and knowledge on how to make it work. And
technical advice courtesy Sam Vest.
Courtesy of Sam Vest Studios. Reach out to Sam Vest Studio for all your audio and visual needs. And then I think we need to give a shout out to just the entirety of our Bible study that we go to on Thursday nights. Jared and Jacqueline East's expectant parents, Jared and Jackie East. They're having a baby, little Zachariah is what they're going to call him, and we're so excited to meet him. But, they host a Bible study at their home on Thursday evenings that Daniel and I both attend, and they all kind of helped us come up with the name for the podcast. So The Eternal Library, brought to you by Jared and Jackie's Bible Study, courtesy of Legacy City Church in Studio City, California. So now that that's out of the way, Daniel, let's talk about one of the best-selling novels of the 20th century. It's one of the most famous books ever written. Mm-hmm. We're talking about The Hobbit. The Hobbit.
The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. John Ronald Rule. Rule? Is that how you say it?
I think that's how you say it. That's how I say it.
Rule.
I don't know. Old Johnny himself, the professor, Ronald Tolkien. So, yeah, I think you guys all knew that it had to start with The Hobbit. I'm so excited to talk about this book, Daniel. This is I don't think it's crazy to say this is one of the greatest books ever written.
It is. Yeah. It's sold over 1 million copies since its publication in 1937. Mm-hmm. I guess in another few years we'll celebrate its centennial.
Oh wow!
Isn't that crazy?
That's insane.
Over 100 million copies sold. One of the most beloved novels in the English language, and definitely one of the most famous books of the 20th century, and one of the first books that I ever read.
Really?
As a kid.
Really? Okay. Talk about that.
So growing up as a kid, I was much more active. Like physically outside, I would ride my bike and go play baseball. And so I didn't like to read books, but I remember one night my parents had rented the film, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Shout out to Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
Pete, if you want to come on the podcast, I'd love to have you.
Yeah. The movie had just come out and my parents had rented it, and it, like at the beginning of the film, there's a single shot of Gollum during the prologue when he's like hovering over the ring inside of his dark cave.
It's like, and intimidating.
Yeah. You only see him from a distance. And anyway, that shot was so frightening to my childhood mind that I was scared that night and I had nightmares. And what was unusual is the next morning, my inclination was, I want to learn more about that creepy thing.
Yeah. This thing terrified me and robbed me of my sleep. I must know more.
Yeah. Because I don't really like being scared of something. If I'm afraid of something, I want to know more about it. So my investigative impulse was turned on, and so I knew that there was a book, The Fellowship of the Ring, and that would give me answers. But I also knew that there was a prologue that came before it called The Hobbit. And so, if I'm going to read these books, I thought I'm going to do this the right way. So I'll start with the very beginning. And so I opened The Hobbit. What would you say?
A very good place to start.
Yeah. Because I want to do it the correct way. This is moron.
By the way, for those who don't know, this is par for the course for Daniel.
This is just
I don't understand something. I need to learn everything about it.
So I opened The Hobbit, absolutely not expecting the character Gollum to be in it at all, because I didn't know anything about this series.
So
I don't know.
You weren't looking. You opened up The Hobbit, and you were like, that was just a stepping stone.
Yeah, that was like reading the prologue of something. I thought I got to get through The Hobbit. I remember even, because remember, I didn't like reading books really at the time. So I remember thinking, this is a chore, but I wanted so bad to defeat my fear of the scary scene in the movie, which I knew would come up in The Fellowship of the Ring. Well, here's what's interesting. It kind of doesn't appear in like Gollum as a character is only mentioned and never really appears. No, that's not true. I guess he's in it a little bit.
I mean, you see him from a distance, but he doesn't, as most of our listeners, I'm sure know, he doesn't actually come on the scene.
But so I'm naive and I don't know this, and I think The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien is going to answer all my questions. But in order to get there, I've got to read this, thing called The Hobbit, and I don't know what this is about. So I was kind of bored and annoyed of it at first, but it gripped me, and I got sucked into the book. A few chapters in, I remember thinking the scene with the trolls, that's kind of fun, and this book has some neat little diversions, and this is entertaining. But I was hooked when I got to the chapter Riddles in the Dark where Gollum appears. But so that was my experience reading the book. I got scared from a movie, wanted to learn more, and opened The Hobbit because that was a stepping stone to get to The Lord of the Rings. What about you, Sean? You've read this book many times. I think you've read it more times than I can even count.
I don't know about that much. Wait, how many times have you read it?
Oh, I mean, only probably 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, I've definitely read it more.
yeah, that's what I mean. Well, but what was when did you first encounter the book? What was it like? Who told you about it, or how did you learn about it? And then what was it like reading it for the first time?
Yeah, so just a little peek behind the curtain. Daniel gave me a bunch of questions to answer about the book before we recorded the podcast, and I jotted down my thoughts.
Sean gave me a bunch of answers.
I said, say this exactly this way.
I wrote the questions. Yeah. He wrote the answers.
It's true. But this was one of the questions, like, what was your first experience with the book? And I actually had to think about that because, what? I don't remember. When did I read it? I have a very poor memory, and I don't remember most of the things that I did.
How did we get here? I don't remember anything.
I don't know where I'm at. What are we doing? As I thought about it, I do remember my first experience with The Hobbit, and it was actually my dear grandma on my mom's side, Grandma Jane. I was sleeping over at her house, as one does when they're a wee little lad. It was one of those, I just spending the night at grandma's house. It's the best time. You get to eat junk food as much as you want. She gives you whatever you want. It's always a good time at grandma and grandpa's house. I remember one time, and I think it was just me. I don't think my brother was born yet. I think it was just, so no, that's not true. Because I had to have been 6 or 7 years old probably at this point. But we had gone to Blockbuster. Shout out Blockbuster. Shout out.
Remember that? Blockbuster.
Yeah, that dates us a little bit. Now they know how old we are. But yeah, we had gone to Blockbuster, went to a couple movies to watch at grandma's house. And my grandma picked up the Rankin Bass animated film of The Hobbit, which you loved.
The Rankin Bass.
Daniel has strong opinions about the Rankin Bass Hobbit adaptation. But,
so creepy and weird. But anyway,
yeah, it did well, but but we love it. And so she picked up that movie, took it home, and she put it in the VCR for us. And that was my first exposure to The Hobbit. And I was like, whoa, this is weird. And at this point, speaking of how it is creepy. Like at this point, all of my film exposure had been, like Disney movies. It had been like, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King. And then she puts on this thing, and yeah, the drawings are like somewhat grotesque and like just very, it's like very, very not the style of Disney.
Yeah.
Very not Disney.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd seen a movie like this, and I was like, what is this? And like, my grandma was like, oh, this is like based off a book, I think. And I was like, oh, okay. And like, I watched the whole thing. That has stayed with me. I remember that night very vividly. I remember images from that movie, and I actually watched it again recently, like in preparation for this episode. And yeah, it's still like, I remember it. It's still today as it was.
Haunts you.
It still haunts me to this day. Yeah. And so, but I didn't read the book until much later. And actually, I don't think I read the book until after the Peter Jackson films came out. And I had a somewhat similar experience, except it wasn't Gollum that scared me in Fellowship of the Ring. It was the ring wraiths.
Oh, well, see, I didn't get that far, because once they showed Gollum, like literally in the first 3 minutes of the film, I was like sent out of the room.
Oh,
so I didn't get that far, but I'm sure that would have scared me too.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. So there were many moments in Fellowship of the Ring that scared me.
You watched the whole Fellowship of the Ring?
Oh, well.
As a kid?
Well, the theatrical cut. So did I really,
sure.
I really see it? Did I really see the real movie?
You watched the abridged version.
I watched the abridged version, yeah. But there were many moments that scared me, but much like you, it intrigued me into this world. So I did not do what you did, Daniel. I started with Fellowship of the Ring because I was like, this is the first one. And I remember trying to read it in like second or third grade. And I did not get very far because, as you know,
the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring is all like plot exposition.
It's all just like Gandalf says to Frodo, hey, at 100 pages in, Gandalf says to Frodo, hey, this ring is going to like destroy the entire world. We need to get it out of here. It's dangerous. And Frodo's like, okay, I'm gonna wait 3 months. And I'm gonna just chill here for another few chapters, and then I'll get going. And then they don't actually get out of the Shire for like 6 more chapters. There's like a billion chapters.
Fine, we can
before they
believe it.
even. Yeah. Well, I love that now. All that stuff in the Shire is great now. But I'm just like, where is Strider? Where's the prancing pony? Where are the ring wraiths? And I'm just like, and I'm in third grade and I'm trying to read The Fellowship of the Ring, and Tolkien's writing style in this book is just not very conducive to the brain of a third grader. And so I like put it down, but then eventually I get a box set from the Scholastic Book Fair. Shout out to the Scholastic Book Fair for a box set of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, the entire trilogy. And at that point, I read The Hobbit for the first time. But much like you, The Hobbit, for most of my relationship with it, has been just a stepping stone to get to The Lord of the Rings. And honestly, like, in some ways, The Lord of the Rings is better than The Hobbit, but in some ways, The Hobbit is better than The Lord of the Rings. And I think I'm at this point now where I'm like, it's not even fair to compare the two. It's like comparing apples and oranges almost, because they're almost completely different genres.
Yeah. The Hobbit is like The Hobbit is a great standalone novel that operates like a fairy tale. It's contained. It has unity of plot. You don't need any other context to read it. It's engaging. It's quaint. It has its own culture. And then The Lord of the Rings is a very expansive, vast, saga-esque epic.
Yeah.
And so it is kind of a different, like The Hobbit would be a fairy tale. The Lord of the Rings would be an epic.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The Hobbit is very much a children's story. It is very much a fairy tale.
Yeah, that is true, because The Lord of the Rings is a little bit more adult.
It is much more adult.
And okay. even the writing style. And then for those of you, so The Hobbit is for children, The Lord of the Rings is for adults, and the Silmarillion is for men in their gray years. The Silmarillion is for the varsity captains.
Yeah. Which me and Daniel have read the Silmarillion. It's in its entirety, just so everyone knows.
Well, that goes without saying.
Because we're better than you.
No. Yeah. Oh boy, that's funny. It does. You kind of graduate up the level.
But you do kind of like. It is interesting now that you mention it. The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion are all very unique pieces of work, and they're all standalone, and they're all different genres.
Yeah,
almost.
And The Hobbit is the easiest to read too. The Lord of the Rings slightly harder language, and the Silmarillion is impossible.
Well, the Silmarillion is a great read.
I agree. It's a beautiful book. It's wonderfully written. It's just written in a different kind of language.
You just have to know what you're doing. Okay, this is a little bit of a tangent, but like the first time I picked up the Silmarillion, I expected it to be in the same vein as like the Lord of the Rings. I didn't expect it to be like the Hobbit at all. I knew at this point, this guy.
He'd gone too deep. There's no going back.
You can't come back from that. But which is interesting because the Silmarillion, he wrote portions of that first before he wrote anything else.
True.
But so you pick up the Silmarillion, and you're just like, it's very much a mythology, and it's written like a mythology. So like, if Lord of the Rings is like, I don't know. You're the literary guy. Do you think it's fair to say Lord of the Rings is almost like the tales of King Arthur, and the Silmarillion is more like the prose Edda? Like it's some kind of Nordic.
I didn't expect you to say that.
That's funny. Some kind of like thought out like mythology.
Well, King Arthur was interesting. That struck a chord. If the Lord of the Rings is Thomas Mallory, then the Silmarillion is Geoffrey of Monmouth.
Yes, I know who these people are.
Yeah. No, so it's like the Hobbit is the great illustrated classics version of whatever this universe called Middle-earth is. The Lord of the Rings is the adult or the more complete unabridged text, and then the Silmarillion is like the old Anglo-Saxon original manuscript. You get the sense that you're reading something very old. The language is archaic, and it's deliberately so.
Yeah,
and the names are old, and you expect seeing Frodo and Gandalf and all your old buddies, but this is like the Elven Kings, and it's very old feeling. And you get the feeling like you're reading a prose Edda.
You're looking like you're like okay, this is a prequel to The Hobbit. Oh, right, and then you come in and you're like Feanor. Fingolfin.
Yeah, in the beginning was Iluvathar.
Yeah. By the way, it always people are always like Tolkien hated allegory. He was not an allegorist, and that always confuses me because at the very first page of the Silmarillion, it's like, in the beginning was Eru Iluvatar, and the word was Eru Iluvatar, and the word was with Eru.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is
referencing something.
Yeah. But so we got it off topic a little bit.
Let's bring it back. You didn't tell me your first time reading The Hobbit. What was it like? So you told me you saw the video, the Ranking Bass, but then you opened the book, and this was after you read Lord of the Rings?
No, I don't think I finished Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
I think I did read The Hobbit first.
Okay.
What my first experience reading it, I don't really remember it. I think I remember because the Rankin Bass movie is in my head at this point. Okay. And so I remember thinking like, oh, it's sticking pretty closely to the movie. Like the movie stuck pretty closely to the book. And so, but I don't remember it making...
By the way, I just need to say this. I can't imagine anyone reading The Hobbit for the first time with the Rankin Bass illustrations in their head.
Oh, well.
What a nightmare that must have been. How terrible.
Oh, well, Daniel. Let's move on.
So you read the book in its entirety, and then what changed for you? Because at first you said like, oh, this isn't The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. So, eventually...
What gripped you?
About The Hobbit?
Yeah, while reading it.
I really don't think that I began to appreciate The Hobbit until I was much older. And in fact, now that you've asked me this question, I want to pull up.
It's over there.
I was trying to find my phone, folks. I want... He's like, it's over there. I want to just read a little something. This is C.S. Lewis's review of The Hobbit.
Oh, I forgot about that. He did write something like that.
Yeah. So this is what he says. For it must be understood that this is a children's book, only in the sense that the first of many readings can be undertaken in the nursery. Alice is read gravely by children, and with laughter by grown-ups. The Hobbit, on the other hand, will be funnier to its youngest readers, and only years later At a 10th or a 20th reading, will they begin to realize what deft scholarship and profound reflections have gone to make everything in it so ripe, so friendly, and in its own way so true. That's C.S. Lewis's take on The Hobbit upon its release. And I think that, I have to say, I think that like mirrors my experience. Like The Hobbit, upon its first reading, it's a kid's book, and it can be appreciated by kids on that level. In my mind, especially in light of the Jackson Lord of the Rings, which very much like hypes up like the medieval like warfare element of it, I'm like looking at like the Battle of Five Armies, and I'm looking at the battle against Smaug, and I am just like, those are the things that I really gravitate towards the most as a youngster reading The Hobbit and the swashbuckling adventure element of it. But as I've gotten older, and especially this last time that I went through it, the most recent reading of it, if you can call it a reading, was listening to the audiobook read by Gollum himself, Andy Serkis. Yeah. Shout out Andy. Andy, you want to come on the podcast? We would love to have you. But yeah, so especially this last time listening through, just seeing a lot of myself in Bilbo and seeing like the themes that Tolkien is playing with. Like, so we read at the top of this episode, Daniel, we read If by Rudyard Kipling, correct?
Yes, we did.
And so many great lines in that. I'm just going to read one or two of them. It says, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So much, like, I think the reason we are using this poem to kind of tie it into this is because, like, so much of Bilbo's journey is a reflection of what it means to, like, grow up and be a man.
Yeah.
And become, like, someone who, because when we first meet Bilbo, he's very just like timid. He's very comfortable. He's very like, oh, I need everything. Everything needs to be done perfectly. Oh no, they're gonna, all these dirty dwarves on my carpet. Oh my gosh, oh no. And by the end of the book, he is walking with kings and dealing with the high elves, with the nobility of like an elven prince, and he is acting wisely and tactfully, and in a very real sense, he becomes the leader of the party of dwarves that he is with. And so,
and that doesn't strike the mind of a child, because like what C.S. Lewis said is really interesting. When we're kids, we're looking for cool scenes and cool action situations, like you were waiting for the battle at the end. And that was my experience reading it too as a kid. The goblins were cool. The whole treasure hunt was cool. Yeah. I was involved in the situation of certain scenes that was cool. But as you, and those things catch the imagination of a child. Yeah. But the adult looks back on the scenes, and the scenes themselves are innocuous and insubstantial and unimportant. It's the growing process of maturation that's more interesting to the adult. But the kid doesn't know that. Just like, let's go on to the next adventure.
Yeah. Which it is just, the book is very episodic. It's like one adventure. It's not like Lord of the Rings where there's kind of like this flow. I don't know how to describe it, but there is like this
The Hobbit is never boring.
It's never boring.
It's one thing after another, poor guy.
It's not that the Lord of the Rings is boring, but there's much more space in Lord of the Rings. Like, there's much more reflection happening in Lord of the Rings. Whereas The Hobbit is just like bing, bang, boom, boom, boom. It's like one adventure. Like, first there's the trolls, then it's the goblins, then it's Gollum, then it's like the wolves and the wargs, then it's the flies and the spiders and Mirkwood, and then it's the dragon, and then there's a battle at the end. It's like all these things like one after another.
So interesting. Yeah. So it's such a fun read.
Yeah. But you're right. Like, it is like there's a maturation happening in the character of Bilbo that you don't pick up on as a child reading it. But Daniel, I've talked a lot. I want to hear about your experience with the book and how your experience has changed over time.
The first time reading it kind of is a throwaway read, because as I said, I had an experience when I got to chapter 5 or whatever is Riddles in the Dark, where you meet Gollum, because then I thought, oh, that's the guy, and I wasn't expecting. And so that night was crazy. I'll never forget it. I was underneath the covers of my bed because it was past bedtime and I was supposed to be asleep. And I had a flashlight
Naughty
with. I know.
boy.
I had a flashlight and I was reading it in the dark. I was reading riddles in the dark.
Which is the exact right way to read it.
No, it's bad for your eyes. Don't stay up late reading. That's the reason why I have very strong prescription lenses and almost blind. But anyway, I was thrilled then because I thought, here's this character that I'm frightened of. I'm going to get to learn him. And it's not a movie that's going to flash something frightening before my eyes. It's a book. So it's more abstract and intellectual. I can study it, which sounds funny to say. I'm a kid, so I'm not...
You're
like
not
consciously articulating all this, but I know it emotionally. I'm like, okay, cool. I can learn about this guy. And then, so because I was interested in him, and now suddenly the rug had been pulled out from under me, and I didn't know if the character was going to come back again, the scary Gollum character. I didn't know he's in the world now, and he's a part of the action that's happening. And Bilbo has the ring. I thought The Hobbit was a separate book.
Yeah.
And so I was very interested after that point. And then it made everything else interesting too. Everything that Thorin was doing, I was interested in now, where I wasn't before. I thought, here's some character. I know he's not in the movie. I was only looking for the movie until I got that little handout. Like, here's a little bit from the movie. Here's Gollum. Gollum shows up, and then everything was opened up to me, and I was invested in the dragon and Gandalf and everybody else. So that was such a profound experience. And okay, another thing that made it profound is I didn't like reading at all.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like any books. And even, I said this earlier, when I went to The Hobbit for the first time, it was like a chore. And I was trying to get to the other one. And even then, I didn't want to read it. I just wanted to learn about Gollum so I couldn't be scared of him.
You were on an investigative journey.
Yeah.
So what you got was an adventure.
Yeah. It wasn't like I was going, oh, this is a novel. I want to enjoy the fantasy of it. Like, I didn't think that way as a kid. I thought, this is a book. You read this in school, like The Hobbit. Oh man, that's an English class. Like, so I didn't.
Which, by the way, I don't recall reading The Hobbit in any of my English classes in high school or middle school or elementary school, and that's a crying shame.
A crying shame. But anyway, so this was like work for me. But then what The Hobbit gave me, and the same thing with the Chronicles of Narnia, is it turned reading from an investigative chore or a research assignment into an aesthetic experience. And so that's why that was so profound. And it happened, I know it happened in that chapter, Riddles in the Dark, but the first 4 or 5 chapters before it set me up for it. And then the rest of the book confirmed it.
Yeah.
So I read the whole thing, and that chapter was the turning point, but the whole book did that for me. It gave me an aesthetic experience. So in later years in life, I looked back on my first reading of The Hobbit, under the covers of my bed late at night when I wasn't supposed to be awake. And I remember that was a turning point. So The Hobbit has always been special to me because that was like my genesis of loving books.
Mm-hmm. It's your origin story.
That and probably 2 others, the Chronicles of Narnia books and the Lemony Snicket, Daniel Handler books, the series of unfortunate events.
Yeah. Both, I think those both also had a profound impact on my childhood as well, which is why we more than likely will talk about both of them at some point.
So you said, Sean, your appreciation of the book The Hobbit has changed over time because you've discovered more and more the profundity of it, right?
Yeah.
You've seen more. I mean, I don't know if you had any other thoughts to say about that, because that was interesting.
You mean I've seen just like the themes, perhaps?
Yeah. Like the first time you reading The Hobbit, you didn't actually like it very much. Is that true? Or
it's not that I didn't like it, but as it was more of a stepping stone. I said, it was more of just like, I want to get to Lord of the Rings and I want to get to like all the cool stuff that happens.
Here's a question. When do you think you were settled in your mind? I really like The Hobbit, the book. I mean,
yeah.
At what age did you kind of cross the corner and say, "Oh, I love that book"?
Honestly, probably when I was in my 20s.
Okay.
It was late. It was
college,
late, but not after that. I had moved to LA at this point. I had moved to LA, and I was working at a movie theater in North Hollywood, and there was a gentleman there, Raul. Shout out Raul, who
Thanks, Raul.
Thanks, Raul. We're here because of you. His family owned a bookshop, and I had left my copies of Lord of the Rings back home at my parents' house in Missouri. And I don't remember why. I just had a hankering to read them again. I hadn't read them in a long time. And he was like, oh, I'll get you. We have like a nice box set at my family's bookstore. I'll bring it to you. And I was like, oh, for real? And then he like came and gave it to me. No charge. Just handed it to me. And I was like, oh, thanks, bro.
Wow.
And that's the box set I still have to this day. And that's the copy that I have next to me right now. And reading through The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings that time, that's when I think I really appreciated them for the first time. Beforehand, it was really just like, you want to read them just to say that you read them.
Yeah, sure.
You want to be like, I've read Lord of the Rings, and it's not that I didn't like them, but I didn't grasp what Tolkien was doing. And Lord of the Rings, especially, you start to see those quiet moments in the Shire when Frodo's leaving and he is just ruminating on the life he's leaving behind and what he's giving up in order to go on this journey to destroy the ring. Like, you start to resonate with that more. Because I had just like gone on a journey. I had just left Missouri to come out here to LA, obviously for much different reasons. Wasn't a lot of self-sacrifice in that.
You weren't looking for treasure and to defeat the dragon?
I was looking for treasure in a sense.
In a way.
Not the right kind of treasure.
In a way.
But yeah. But then with The Hobbit, honestly, I got to be honest, this last read through or listen through, when I'm actually thinking and I'm trying to find little things, little nuggets to grab so that we can talk about on the podcast, I think that was when it really came home for me. I was just like, this is a fantastic book. Because when you're actually looking, this is a kind of gets into like the theme of the whole podcast. When you're actually looking for truth and beauty in a work of art, whether it's a novel or a painting or a movie or whatever, your odds are you're going to find it if it's there to be found. Sometimes it's not there to be found, and then that would be a bad piece of art. But when you're actually looking for beauty, you start to find it. And this is when, this last time when I listened through it, listening to good old Andy doing his impressions of all the characters, I was like, this is fantastic. This is a fantastic story. And Bilbo's character arc is so profound. I think Bilbo, do you think it's fair to say that Bilbo changes more than Frodo in the Hobbit?
More than Frodo. If the question was just, does Bilbo change? That's undeniable.
Yes.
But more than Frodo, I've never been asked that before. I don't know how to compare the two. I think
maybe it's fair to say it this way. Like, Bilbo changes in a
I kind of want to say Frodo suffers more than Bilbo.
Frodo suffers more. So they do both change, but Bilbo's change mirrors the classic like hero's journey type of.
Bilbo is like David Copperfield.
Yeah.
He changes a lot, but his change is upward moving and fortuitous, and he succeeds once he gives effort and learns the lesson he needs to. He succeeds almost instantly.
Yeah.
Frodo's growth is the growth of somebody who just suffers and there's no light, suffers depression, hardship, and from all outward appearances goes down, but has to endure. So, Frodo doesn't talk with kings much, and he doesn't, like, Frodo's alone for most, and he's got Sam with him. But Frodo is just a journey through the mud. Frodo really goes through it.
Yeah.
Bilbo does too, but Bilbo is more like a David Copperfield kind of character. Everything works for him.
Yeah. Bilbo is more like, Bilbo goes through a lot and suffers some in his own right, but it's to the end that there's a treasure at the end of this. There's a light at the end of this that he will get to have. Frodo is just a journey.
He's sacrificing himself.
He's jumping into death.
Yes.
He doesn't know if he is convinced, and this is something you don't quite get in the movies, but for most of Lord of the Rings, Frodo is convinced that he will not survive the journey, and he's making peace with that.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Along the way. Yeah, it's heartbreaking, but we're not here to talk about that.
I know. Yeah, this is about The Hobbit.
Yeah. So, Daniel, what are your greatest takeaways from The Hobbit? We've talked a lot about our experience with it, how we've changed, how our view of it has changed over time. Now, tell me, what are your greatest takeaways?
I have 2 or 3. The first one being kind of an easy one, but it's just when you're a kid reading a book like The Hobbit, it's one of those books that establishes categories in your mind. It was one of the first books I read that dealt with imaginative concepts like dragons and elves and magic and wizards and things. So it established an aesthetic in my mind of what those things are, and it made categories for me. And those things don't exist in reality, of course, but the fashioning of a child's imagination and the building of categories and capacities to imagine certain made up things is a rite of passage, I think. So my mind was expanded, and I had new categories for things, fictional things, but things nonetheless. My imagination was pushed to envision things I'd never envisioned before, and so The Hobbit was like an expansion of my mind in that sense. So that's the first takeaway. The Hobbit expanded my mind, is what I would say.
Just a quick comment on that. It is interesting that like being exposed to The Hobbit at some point in your childhood almost is like a rite of passage. It feels like now.
Yeah, it can be.
Like even if you don't like it or if you never revisit it, if you're just not a book guy, you know about The Hobbit. And you have
you know about The Hobbit. You know
about that Bilbo.
Yeah.
You've heard of Bilbo.
You
at least know who Gandalf is. And there are tropes in The Hobbit that are just in the cultural consciousness, like going on an adventure to slay a dragon. That's just like part of.
Yeah, it's the myth for the modern era. It's the new Arthur. It's the new, Aeneas.
Yeah.
But okay, so the second takeaway then is the value of having an aesthetic experience. My reading of The Hobbit is probably different from yours. In fact, I'm sure it is, because you described when you read The Hobbit each subsequent time, it's grown and gotten better. I'm not saying my reading of The Hobbit has gotten worse, but every time I've read The Hobbit now, I've returned to it wanting to rekindle the first experience that I had, and I can't get it. So, well, it's not like I can't get it. It's I can get it, but I'm older now. I don't know if that makes sense. But so I read it like right before COVID. So this is like 2019. I reread The Hobbit again. That maybe was the last time I read it. I remember sitting down in my little comfy reading chair thinking, oh, right, here we go, The Hobbit.
I have that same thought. Every time I pick up a book that I love and I'm going to read it again, I always try to get as comfortable as possible. Like, here we go.
Yeah, and I think I hype it up too much in my mind because, it's whatever. It's a Wednesday night and I've got nothing. I've freed up my schedule. I've got 2 or 3 good solid hours. Nobody's going to bug me. I turn off my phone and I'm like, yes, we're going to dive into The Hobbit book. This is going to be great. And I think my experiences throughout the years of my life and growing older has been, I remember how earth-shattering it was in my childhood mind to read The Hobbit and suddenly love reading again, that I think I can never match that. I can't go back to it and have a paradigm shift of thought again because I'm already on the other side. So I think the second thing is the value of an aesthetic experience. Every time I go back to The Hobbit, I appreciate what it did for me in my younger years, and I kind of commemorate and remember how important it is for a young mind to be exposed to imaginative content for the sake of breaking free of your own small, contained, routine life and learning to contemplate bigger realities than yourself and your immediate world.
Yeah.
That was just incredible for me. So I guess going back to read The Hobbit again for me is more like commemorative remembrance of how important it was. New sparks aren't always flying. I'm remembering how great it. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. Yeah. It does. You're reflecting on what it is to experience something for the first time, and you're remembering what that did for you then, and you're appreciating that, which is like a great piece of literature will kind of grip you. Well, sometimes a great piece of literature, you don't realize how great it is until like subsequent readings.
Of course.
But then there are others that grip you right away and you're just like enthralled with it. And that same sense of enthrallment doesn't happen with each subsequent reading. But with each subsequent reading, you can discern a little more clearly why it did that for you in the first place.
And that's true. And each subsequent reading has given me more, like, I guess, psychological content and revelation. because I'm reading it now and understanding what allegory is and what symbolism is. And so I'm getting a lot out. I made it sound earlier like I'm reading The Hobbit and it's just dead. It's not dead. I'm getting a lot out of it.
Daniel hates The Hobbit.
No. I'm getting a lot out of it, but no longer is there the suspense of I can't wait to turn the page to find out the information of what will happen to these characters next, because I already know. So it's no longer about the thrill of the adventure. Now, when I read it, it's remembering my childhood experience and also now understanding that, oh, Tolkien's employing a trope and this is a symbol and this is really interesting, more from a philosophical and theological standpoint.
Is there a particular example you can pull out from the book that fit, where you're like, this is a trope he's employing? That is,
I mean, they're all over. I guess the similarity to Beowulf stands out the most to me now because, well, there are passages of The Hobbit which quote almost directly Beowulf.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah, almost directly. In fact, I should have brought my copy of Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf.
Wait, you mean this one over here?
No. Tolkien himself made a translation of Beowulf. It was his life's work, and he thought that would be what he would be known as.
I had to take the headphones off for a second because I had to pull my copy of Tolkien's Beowulf off the shelf and hand it to Daniel.
So Tolkien considered that this would be his most important, most well-known work in his life. Yeah. This has happened to many authors who they write some throwaway book and think, no one's going to read this. My masterpiece is whatever. Yeah. But people don't read the self-styled masterpiece. They read the little book that was written in a weekend, So the same is true with Tolkien. So his translation of Beowulf was something that he worked on and revisited for decades. It was his life's work, and it was unfinished, I think, at the time he died. I mean, it's a completed translation, but he was always going back and revising words that he had translated and writing commentary on it and expanding it. So Beowulf.
Great artists often do.
Yes. Who was it that said no work of art is ever finished? It's only abandoned.
I don't remember. Someone, if you know, put it in the comments section.
That was a test. No. So I guess you said what tropes am I aware of that he's performing? Mm-hmm. Beowulf is over 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
And so the quest to hunt a dragon, the quest for gold, the quest for honor and renown. Bilbo lives in an honor-shame culture, much like the Anglo-Saxons did or the Greeks.
Except it's different because in those cultures, it's like, go on an adventure, do something great, and you'll have honor. And in Bilbo's culture, it's like, if you leave your little home and leave your garden and go and do something adventurous, you suck.
Yeah.
Like, you're dead.
What a fascinating commentary on, sort of municipal life in modern cities. But anyway, so the tropes are there in the form of fantasy plot devices, like a river that makes you forget, or a spider that can sting you, or a giant troll that turns into stone when the sun rises. Those are old. Tolkien didn't invent those, but also the fact that they're so old that they predate Beowulf and go back as far as Virgil and Homer and even the Bible.
So you're saying The Hobbit stands in this long tradition, which is such a cool thing to think about, because The Hobbit, as we already said, is very much like a children's story on its face, but it owes so much to these great mythologies and works in the past, which Tolkien was steeped in. Mm-hmm. And he was reading Beowulf, he's reading Virgil, he's reading Homer, he's reading like the medievalists and the not the Enlightenment. He would have hated the Enlightenment. The Renaissance thinkers, but and he's pulling from all of these, and The Hobbit stands on the shoulders of all these great works. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite scenes of The Hobbit?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
If you had to pick, you have many, I know. If you had to pick one scene that was the most impactful or formative or memorable, I know that's a tough one. You have many favorite scenes, but what do you think stands above them all?
A scene that stands above
I don't know. Is there one? Or maybe there isn't. I don't know.
Impactful?
Or what about this? What's the most memorable scene in your mind from the novel, The Hobbit? You think of The Hobbit, you think this part.
I'll tell you, So I think there are scenes and moments and lines in The Hobbit that I think are impactful, but I don't think that's quite what you're asking. I think you're asking like what
You personally, Sean.
what scene I personally enjoy the most.
Yes, that's what I want to hear.
And I think all of chapter 4, which is
what's chapter 4?
Over Hill and Under Hill.
Okay.
This is when they've left the house of Elrond.
Okay.
They've had their adventure with the trolls. By the way, like we're referencing a lot of The Hobbit and a lot of these scenes, assuming you guys have read the book. So
spoilers at the ready.
Yeah, spoilers will abound, and you should have read the book at this point. So sorry,
if you haven't, turn off the podcast now.
Turn it off now, or just go read the book. Actually, it's a better use of your time, honestly. Turning off this podcast.
What are you doing?
Read the book. Like,
read the book.
Stop it. What is your deal? You're in trouble, and we're here to help you.
You need help.
yeah, get some therapy or something. Don't get therapy. Go get biblical counseling from a pastor of the Word of God who can apply the Word to your life.
Anyway.
PSA over. So, Over Hill and Under Hill, this is when they are journeying up into the mountains, and they got to get over the mountains. They're in the Misty Mountains.
Oh, that's the best.
Far over the Misty Mountains told. And there's a rainstorm, and the stone giants are out, and they're throwing their rocks.
Oh, really? That's your favorite part? I'm so surprised.
It's the whole, well, not that, it's really this whole chapter.
Okay.
And everything in it. It's not the stone giants.
Okay.
Alone. So they go into this cavern because they're trying to get out of the rain.
Yeah.
And then what's going to happen? Of course, a big crack is going to open up in the back of the cave, and all these goblins are going to jump out, and they're going to like round up all the dwarves, round up all their ponies, and take them down to Goblin Town. and so
love it.
And so I love this part. And then they go down there to Goblin Town. They meet the Great Goblin, and then what happens? Gandalf comes out of nowhere with Glamdring, the foe hammer, the goblin,
the sword,
the goblin cleaver, and smites the Great Goblin.
Mighted.
Yeah, and then they run out, and then Bilbo gets left behind, and then we go to chapter 5, which is Riddles in the Dark. But this whole part where they're being kidnapped, captured by the goblins, this is when the book really takes off for me. Because it's just cool. Like,
sure, the mountains and the goblins and stuff.
This is the first time we're introduced to goblins in the world of Tolkien. If you're like us and you grew up on the Peter Jackson movies, you saw like Peter Jackson's interpretations of orcs and goblins and the Uruk-hai, and so you have a picture of that in your mind. And if you're anything like me, you always kind of thought the bad guys were cooler than the good guys growing up. And so the goblins come out, and let's be real.
Okay.
Goblins are just kind of cool. I know they're evil. I know they're evil. I know they're a personification of wickedness in Tolkien's mind.
And Sean was digging it.
But they're cool. And so they jump out with their scimitars, and they're just like, gotcha. And then
gotcha.
And then there's a battle in the halls of Goblin Town. And but this whole scene is very important. And this is a testament to Tolkien's gifting as a writer, because this seems just like another little episode in the journey. That's just something they have to get through. But the implications of what happens here will come back around at the end of the book.
Like what?
Like they kill the Great Goblin, and this is what leads ultimately to the Battle of Five Armies at the end of the book. Is because they're seeking retribution for the death of the Great Goblin. And so they set in, it's just a little episode.
I kind of forgot that, actually.
But they set into motion a series of events that are going to have major consequences later down the line.
At first, when you said my favorite part of the book, I kind of pushed you a little bit because I wanted to get one big scene, and because I know you wrote several down. And at first I was surprised when you said that, but now that makes sense. Yeah. That's classic Sean. That's a good chapter for Sean.
It's a good Sean chapter for sure.
That's a Sean scene.
But Daniel, what about you?
What about, what's
favorite book, favorite scenes? What's a scene that jumps out at you? You think about The Hobbit and you're like, I think of this scene or this moment or this line or this person or what.
Yeah. I have to say again, it's the same chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark.
Okay, so here's something that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I actually don't care for that chapter that much.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's the most important part of the book for me.
It is like, and it's maybe it's the most important chapter maybe in the whole book as it relates to the rest of
Sure.
like it is like such an important chapter. And we talked about Gollum's story a little bit in the last episode, and Gollum's introduction here and his relationship to the ring is so important to the rest of the story. But I don't care for that chapter that much.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can explain it a little bit. And maybe in future episodes when we talk about other books, I'll be saying this again because it consumed my young mind. Is the chapter Riddles in the Dark really has it has no effect on the story of The Hobbit.
Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings, it has immense effect.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter that it's in The Hobbit.
Yeah. Well, the finding of the ring is important for the rest
The finding of the ring helped. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But he could have just found it. Like there didn't need to be a Gollum and a riddle challenge.
Yeah.
Although it's cool that there is.
It is cool. Yeah.
And I know it's cool too. But like there's something about the story is clearly the momentum of the story is clearly building.
Mm-hmm.
And then chapter 5 interrupts it and the plot kind of stops dead.
Yeah.
And there's this little like chess tournament between two characters that, at the time, Bilbo's not very important in the story and Gollum is a nobody and doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I read that and I thought, instead of thinking this is a throwaway chapter, this is unusual, this doesn't fit with the momentum of the story, my brain reacted opposite. And I thought, this is the most important chapter.
Yeah.
Because it's like, do you remember in the original Star Wars movies, whenever Han Solo...
It's always going to go back to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, and the Bible, that's the air we...
Yeah. Well, like, this is a good illustration, too. Star Wars did it. Remember whenever Han Solo talks about Jabba the Hutt?
Oh, yeah.
And it's before Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
So in The Empire Strikes Back...
And if you're watching the original cut, the original theatrical cut, Jabba the Hutt doesn't even appear.
Yeah.
You don't see him until Return of the Jedi.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. I need to say that because the VHS tape that I watched as a kid had no scene with Jabba the Hutt in it. So the version I'm thinking of when I say Star Wars is like the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
But Han talks about Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah.
With Greedo, the little alien who shoots him at the bar.
Yeah.
And then he talks about it
Which
with...
he shoots first, obviously.
Yeah. He talks about it with Luke and he's like, I got debts to pay with all this money and you never see Jabba, and it's not really has anything to do with Luke Skywalker or the galaxy. It's just this weird, you just know in the back of your mind, Han Solo has this problem with debt and this gambler. That is so haunting and it's so effective to me. I'm a sucker for that stuff where the main plot is happening, but some little subtle side plot is happening, apart from the main action.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it's a proclivity I have to notice details or to be intrigued by things that are presented as less than. But that captivated me so much. And I remember feeling suspense, feeling an ominous weight over Star Wars because Darth Vader's scary, but there's also this menacing presence that you don't know. It's like that's creeping in and closing in on Han Solo. And then you watch Return of the Jedi and it's a Muppet.
It's a big fat slug.
Yeah, it wasn't scary at all. Yeah, the buildup was terrible.
Yeah.
So, but I felt that with The Lord of the Rings, and it was way more effective than Star Wars because Gollum truly did scare me.
Yeah.
But I knew that he would come back again in Fellowship, and I didn't know how or to what extent. And I knew that the ring was important because it's in the title of the trilogy, which comes after. And so all these like ominous shadows were cast over The Hobbit, and it made it, I don't know, for the plot of The Hobbit to interrupt and for there just these two characters in a dark tunnel, totally quiet, all alone, to have this little chess game was so intriguing to me. I thought that was so interesting. Yeah. And I loved the grand scale epic stuff. But for him to go into a quiet room with one or two comparatively small characters and do a little just game of the mind.
Yeah.
I thought that was that totally got me.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the most memorable scene for
Well,
me.
I have thoughts on that because there's a struggle going on there between good and evil that is very profound, and that it is like when you've come up against something like truly wicked, which is what Gollum is. He is like, he can't even really truly be said to be human anymore because he's been so corrupted and so just.
Well, I might disagree.
Okay.
But sorry, finish your thought. Well, so like the goblins to me, when they attack, my first reading of the book, when the goblins attacked, they're just like monsters.
Yeah.
And you got to kill them. They're what
Of course.
Beowulf describes as vermin.
Yes.
Like it's not wrong for Beowulf to kill Grendel because Grendel is vermin.
Yeah.
It's just like a cockroach. It's a pest. You kill it. It has no soul. It's a deformity. It's a monster.
Yeah.
But with Gollum, here's what made him more scary: is he is human-like. He can think and reason, and he isn't at one point he like he has such a weird way of talking. I honestly hate it. But he like talks to himself, and at one point he like feels sorry, or he apologizes, or he's having an internal discourse, and he's incredibly like burdened.
And this when he's debating on when Bilbo overhears him, and he's debating on what to do after Bilbo disappears.
Yeah.
He's like, we got to go head him off. We must go head him off.
Yeah.
We have to go wait for him at the entrance, the back entrance, or whatever.
Yeah. Like you can't access the internal dialogue of a goblin. You don't know what they're thinking because maybe they're not thinking at all. They're just beasts.
Yeah.
But Gollum, you can kind of reason with him. And another thing, the fact that he does know riddles, he's intellectual. He's sentient. He's conscious. He's aware. He can reason. And so that's what made him scary, because he is a monster. He's like this gangly, skinless, creepy thing. But like he's part human. And then I started to wonder, how did he get this way? How did he come down to this tunnel? And why is he here? Why does he like the rings? What does he do with all of his time?
Yeah.
Like he just lives down here? It's so creepy. It's creepy because he's partly human.
Yeah. That's a good point. But yeah, he's more pitiable.
Yeah, of course.
And which is a whole theme that runs throughout the books, is just like, there is a real, orcs are beyond saving.
Yeah.
Orcs cannot be redeemed, no matter how much the Rings of Power wants to try. Orcs cannot be redeemed. Gollum, though, does have a spark of humanity left in him, and he can be. There is a real possible reality that he can be redeemed because Frodo and Gandalf both make attempts to kind of draw him back to the light in Lord of the Rings. So I think you're right, Daniel. But yeah, the point I was getting at is in Riddles in the Dark, which is arguably the most important chapter in the book.
But you hate it. You wish it was stricken from the record.
I hate it, but it's like, let's get to the dragon.
No, I know. Of course. I love the whole book, and I wish more could be said about the dragon.
But so there is something happening in Riddles in the Dark that fits into the narrative flow of the book. This is the first time Bilbo's alone.
Yeah, that's true.
This is why it's important. Bilbo is on his own. He doesn't have Gandalf. He doesn't have any dwarves.
Yeah.
The last time he was in a situation like this was with the trolls, and then Gandalf comes and saves the day. This time he's on his own.
Yes.
And he's got nothing but his wits. And this is the first time he gets himself out of trouble.
Yeah.
And overcomes a challenge on his own.
Yeah, and it's a totally new type of creature. It's not a goblin or a dragon or something recognizable. Bilbo's never experienced anything like this. And that's what opened up my imagination as a kid too, because like, what are you?
Yeah.
Like Gollum is a thing.
Yeah.
He is part human, and he has recognizable human emotions, but he's not human.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's so good. Like that encounter with the supernatural, and you're alone, and you've got to figure it out yourself, and it's a battle of the wits, and all that was great.
Yeah, and Tolkien actually points to Gollum's humanity. Now that you mention it, he mentions a time when Gollum used to suck eggs with his grandmother. You remember that part? Where he's
I do not remember that, but that sounds terrifying.
Yeah. He's like, no, I can't find it in the book, but he talks about how one of the answers to one of the riddles that Bilbo gives him is eggs. That's the answer.
Oh, yeah.
It's a riddle.
I do remember.
Yeah. And Gollum thinks back. Tolkien says he thinks back to a long, long time. He calls up memories that he hadn't thought about in a long time.
Yeah.
And one of the memories was like with his grandmother. So he has a familial relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're
Crazy.
exactly right. Now that you're thinking about it, I repent of what I said.
No.
Yeah.
No. And like, I love the grand scale epic stuff. When we got to the House of the Elves,
Yeah.
I was in it. I was like, this is great. But if we had to isolate just one scene that was the hinge point, the most important, I'd say that would be it for me.
Yeah. Okay, Daniel. So as we said in our previous episode, we're trying to understand how like Christians deal with literature, how Christians read literature. What does it look like to enjoy a book to the glory of God? And it's easier to do with something like The Hobbit because it's coming from a man who has a Christian worldview and who is steeped in good literature of all sorts, Christian and non-Christian, but he is centered on the Bible, I would say. Tolkien, there is so much theology. No matter how much Tolkien wants to say, I'm not an allegorist, there's so much theology just steeped in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings especially. So what theological truths do you see or perhaps another way to say it is, what do you see that is good, true, and beautiful in The Hobbit?
So much. I think The Hobbit can be misused if you approach it with a fleshly, worldly mindset, because you can turn anything wicked, I guess.
Yeah.
There's that verse in, I think it's 1 Thessalonians, to the pure, all things are pure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so you can corrupt anything, but by and large, The Hobbit is a safe book to read because you're in the hands of a person who's treating goodness with a proper moral compass, and who's calling evil evil.
Yeah.
And dragons need to be killed, and gold corrupts, and the way to combat wickedness is with goodness. So that's the fundamental value system that the book is communicating.
Yeah.
So that means this world is a world like God's world.
Yes.
The same metaphysical principles apply here, even if the elves and the magic laws are slightly different. Like, it's a different world, but it's the same moral order. And so Bilbo has to learn to be a good friend. He has to learn courage, and he has to learn that there are bigger things happening than himself and his own comforts.
Yes.
So those aren't necessarily theological, I guess, as I'm saying them.
Yeah.
But they're devotional, I guess. I don't know. You say they're Christian in a way.
I would say they're theological because like all truth is God's truth, right? As you mentioned in the previous episode, Colossians 3, right? How all things, what is it say in Colossians 3? Remind us.
Or Colossians 2, where it says, in Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge.
Yes. So in Christ are all treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And so when you see something in The Hobbit that is true and that accords with the world God made, well, that is theological because it is coming from the hand of God. It's a truth about God and about people and about the world he made and what it means to be truly human. And so, yeah, when we first meet Bilbo, you mentioned how he has to learn that there are things greater than him. And we first meet him, he's not like a bad guy.
Yeah.
He's a very pleasant, very charming hobbit, but he likes to just sit on the steps of his hobbit.
Yeah, he's middle class.
He's middle class. By the way, this is an interesting thing that I learned not too long ago. In the Shire, Bilbo has like a mailbox.
Okay.
And he has like, which means there's a mail system, which means there's a post office.
Well,
but this is a medieval world, clearly.
They had mail in the medieval world.
But like they didn't have it like this.
Yeah, they didn't have it like
They didn't have mailboxes.
They had messengers and
yes, but what I'm getting at is Bilbo is living. What I'm getting at is Bilbo is clearly living in like an English countryside.
Yeah, that's true.
The Hobbit very much mirrors Tolkien's own life.
Yeah,
it's much more civilized.
It's pretty clear the Shire has a lot of correlations to, Tolkien's contemporary England.
Yes. I think Tolkien himself is on record saying, I'm very much a Hobbit myself.
Yeah.
I'm very Hobbit-like.
He said that.
He said it. But Bilbo is like in his little Hobbit hole. He's in his little civilized middle-class society. He's very comfortable. There's nothing bad ever happens here. It's very peaceful, very quiet, very quaint. And then what happens? A wizard shows up.
Yeah.
Something comes in and just upends his entire comfortable world and system. And he's drawn away from his comfort into something bigger than himself.
Mm.
And he has to go help these dwarves recover their lost kingdom and their lost wealth. And he has a stake in it. He's promised a 14th share of all the dragon gold, but he's in over his head.
Mm.
And the point of the book, and in fact, I would even say this: Gandalf does not rope Bilbo into this journey to make him rich. He does not. The money and the wealth is secondary. Gandalf pulls Bilbo out of his hole, out of his comfort, into this adventure because he wants to make Bilbo into someone greater.
He's discipling him.
He's discipling him.
Yeah, I think he is too.
He's discipling
right.
him in a sense. Like he puts Bilbo into a situation where Bilbo has to learn to sink or swim.
Yeah.
And this isn't just like, this isn't like, rugged American, like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and like do something with your life. It's not simply that. It is in God's world, you become who you are meant to be in Christ through sacrifice and through forsaking comfort, forsaking ease, putting others above yourselves, giving yourselves to something greater than yourself. And what is Bilbo doing if not learning to value other things and other people more than his own comfort? By the time we get to the end of the story, Bilbo doesn't care about the gold. He doesn't care. He's like, I don't need any of this gold. I don't care, but I've made friends with all these people and I want to do right by my friends.
Yes.
And they're on the spoiler alert, Smaug's been killed.
Yeah.
They have the gold, but there's all these armies encamped around them. You got the elves, you got the people from Lake Town, the dwarves are coming down from the Blue Mountains, and the goblins are coming down. There's this big battle about to happen. All Bilbo wants is for there to be peace. And so he goes and he negotiates with the elves and with the men to stop any bloodshed from happening. And he knows, like, when Thorin, the leader of the dwarves, finds out that I'm betraying my friends in this way, I'm going to be in a bad way. But I need to do the right thing and I need to protect these people. And he becomes a more noble person.
Absolutely.
As the story progresses. And he does come back and he becomes rich in the end, but that wasn't the point.
Yeah, that's
not the point.
Side.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with us as believers. Like, when Christ calls us out of our life of ease and comfort and calls us to come and die, that's what Christianity is. I think it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer that said that, is that he says, like, when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. And for us, when we're called to forsake a life of comfort and ease for the sake of others, for the sake of something greater than ourselves, which means you die to yourself and you give up what you want in order that someone else might have life with Christ, or that someone else's needs might be met as Christ does. Like, what does Philippians 2 say? He emptied himself of all that he was, all of his glory, which was rightfully his, and he came down here and he served sinful human beings and gave himself as a living sacrifice for our salvation, to the end that we might be glorified with him in eternity forever, to be given something we don't deserve. It's not a one-to-one correlation with Bilbo's journey, but the point is the Christian life is meant to be one of self-sacrifice. And as Bilbo journeys, he learns to be more sacrificial. Would you agree with all that?
Oh, yeah. And he's able to be sacrificial because he cares. He's such a small-hearted homebody at the beginning of the book. And then, like you said, he's concerned by the end with geopolitical events and with big national level goings on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really interesting. He's at the beginning of the book, he's like a little kid playing video games who doesn't want to leave his living room. And then at the end of the book, he's a national hero.
Yeah.
And so the book is great for expanding your appreciation of the bigger realities that are around you, which are outside of you.
Yes. And so I want to read, maybe we should read, we've been going a while. I think we should read one or two lines that we really like from the book. And I want to read one right now that really resonates with me, that is in line with what we're saying here. So, you mentioned that Bilbo, like, he learns to care. He learns to love and care because he's friends with these dwarves. How many times throughout the book do we see Bilbo just like being embittered and
Yeah,
judging the dwarves and being like, oh, this dwarvish racket and like, oh, these dwarves and like he's just complaining. And there's so many times Tolkien is like, he wished that he was back in his comfortable little hobbit hole, not for the last time.
Yeah.
So he's thinking, he's being...
That's relatable.
Yeah. No, totally. Like, I haven't arrived. I still wrestle with a desire for comfort and ease as well. And that's why The Hobbit is so helpful for me, because I'm just like, Bilbo's on the same journey.
Yeah.
And he comes through in the end, which means I will too. So, but he's upset with these dwarves. Most of the time, he doesn't like really even consider them friends. But then at the end, after the battle, and the last words he says with Thorin before this moment is when Thorin tells him to go away, and Thorin basically banishes Bilbo from his presence because Bilbo stole the Arkenstone, which was precious to Thorin, gave it to the elves and the men as a bargaining chip to avoid like a great siege of the mountain. There's the Battle of Five Armies, and then they come, and then Thorin is mortally wounded at the end of the battle, and he calls Bilbo to himself and basically asks Bilbo to forgive him. And this is what he says. Bilbo says to him, "Farewell, King under the mountain. This is a bitter adventure if it must end so, and not a mountain of gold can amend it. Yet I am glad that I have shared in your perils. That has been more than any Baggins deserves." "No," said Thorin. "There is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom, blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. But sad or merry, I must leave it now. Farewell." Then Bilbo turned away, and he went by himself and sat alone, wrapped in a blanket. And whether you believe it or not, he wept until his eyes were red and his voice was hoarse. He was a kindly little soul. Indeed, it was long before he had the heart to make a joke again. So he's gone on this journey with Thorin. Thorin has not been the kindest to Bilbo along the entire journey. And the last time they saw each other before this, Thorin told Bilbo to go away and never come back. And then they part in friendship, and Bilbo weeps for Thorin. And that's a heart that has been transformed by love and compassion.
That's
and
good.
Friendship. And you can weep over someone who was unkind to you for most of your relationship to them and part with them as friends. And this is just like when you go through something together with someone, when you go on through a trial or an adventure with someone, it develops this bond between you. And that's what has happened between Bilbo and Thorin. So,
that's good.
Yeah.
It's good to write stories like that. That's a picture of a good heart.
Yes.
Bilbo has, and it says it, Bilbo has a good heart. That's the kind of stories that we love. We want to read more of that. As children, we don't know that yet as young minds, so we need stories like this to show us that's what a good heart does. Even if you're mad at somebody, you recognize the bigger, more important reality, which is this is your friend, this is your brother. Yeah. And Bilbo's weeping in that scene. That was good that you read that. That's a good heart. That was a nice scene.
He's a kindly little soul.
Yes, that's right.
And
that's good.
We should be like that. We should love cheer and song and joy more than hoarded gold.
Yes.
All right, Daniel, what about you? What's some favorite lines of yours?
I just have one that I'll read, and it's unexpected, and it's not the one how certain lines stay with you.
Yeah.
And you're like, why did I remember that one? It's not the great pivotal scene, but I've always remembered this line, and I've never forgotten it. And in my edition, it's on page 48, but I don't know which. You have a different page number. Yeah. But it goes like this. It's one sentence. "Now it is a strange thing, but things that are good to have and days that are good to spend are soon told about and not much to listen to. While things that are uncomfortable, palpitating, and even gruesome may make a good tale and take a deal of telling anyway." That's not as profound as yours, but
that is profound, actually.
Well, here's how it's, for whatever reason, that line has stayed in my memory and I can't get it out. And I remember other things. I have other quotes, but that I know that if you say, what's one quote from The Hobbit, that my mind immediately goes there. It's a strange thing that good days, happy times, and pleasant experiences are soon forgotten. hardships are memorable.
Mm.
Great stories are made of gruesome, palpitating, irritating events.
Yeah.
And so as a theme, Bilbo wants comfort, and that would be more pleasant. But that's not the story.
Yeah.
The story is he loses his coat, he gets trapped by the spiders, one bad thing happens after another. It's fun to read about, but if we lived through this, it would be horrible. Yeah. Getting stuck in a barrel and or it's just awful.
Having to go and talk face to face with a dragon.
Yeah. It's really a miserable story.
Yeah.
But it makes a great tale.
Yeah.
And this sets a precedent for all of literature, and it kind of is a metaphor, I think, for life.
It is. It 100% is.
God's story of redemptive history. Why doesn't God just smash Satan right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's he doing?
Yeah.
There's a story happening, is I think the right answer.
Yeah.
There's a larger story about bigger forces than we know and can see.
Mm-hmm.
And literature taps into that by expanding our minds and showing us aesthetic experiences of new categories, new beings, new possibilities. There are bigger things happening. And it's going to be unpleasant.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. But those pass into the greatest stories, and they make the greatest works of literature.
Yes, and going back to the world that God has made and how this comports with that, I've talked about this so many, when we get to the topic of God's sovereignty over evil.
Here we go.
We always knew we would come here. By the way, we're all good Calvinists here. I'm not going to explain what that means because this isn't a theology podcast, but you should go learn what that means. But so you can conceive of a world that was unfallen, and that would have been good. Imagine Adam and Eve never sinned, never listened to Satan. Satan never falls. There's no evil that enters the world. God creates a world that is perfect, that is sinless, and where humanity just enjoys God and lives in his presence forever, uninterrupted by anything wicked. And that would be good. That'd be a good place to be. I'd want to live in that world. But there's something better. There's something more glorious about a redeemed world. There's something more glorious about a world that has been fallen and plunged into sin and darkness, and that has been redeemed by a Savior and has been renewed and will be made perfect in the end. When you can look back on all the sin that has ever been done in history and look at Christ glorified and look at us glorified after the resurrection, when judgment has taken place and sin and death has been banished, and we look around at the world renewed and we recognize how wicked the evil was in light of how good the redemption is, that's a better story. And that's a better world to live in. There's something more glorious about redemption and victory over evil than there is about just simply goodness and comfort and ease. And I don't know why that is, because but that's the world God has made. And God has decreed in his wisdom that is the story that he's going to tell.
Yes, and we trust him in that.
Yeah.
And suffering also shows your reality. Pain will bring out the truth.
Yeah.
And we know that God's revealing himself and his truth. And our hearts are revealed as well through it, and it's good. We trust him.
Amen. Amen. Okay, I think we got one or two more lines, and then
what do we got? Oh, some more quotes, some more favorite scenes.
Some more favorite scenes. I got
what's the next
one or two. This is one that just stood out to me the last time I went through it, and it's just kind of funny. And this is in the chapter I mentioned earlier, my favorite chapter, Overhill and
Chapter 4.
Yeah, chapter 4. This is when the goblins are taking them down to Goblin Town, and Tolkien says this about goblins. He gives us some background on goblins. This is on page 62 of my edition. Now, goblins are cruel, wicked, and bad-hearted. They make no beautiful things, but they make many clever ones. They can tunnel and mine as well as any, but the most skilled dwarves, when they take the trouble, though they are usually untidy and dirty. Hammers, axes, swords, daggers, pickaxes, tongs, and also instruments of torture they make very well, or get other people to make them to their design, prisoners and slaves that have to work till they die for want of air and light. it is not unlikely that they invented some of the machines that have since troubled the world, especially the ingenious devices for killing large numbers of people at once, for wheels and engines and explosions always delighted them, and also not working with their own hands more than they could help. But in those days and those wild parts, they had not advanced, as it is called, so far. Well, so you have to know a little bit about Tolkien to really appreciate that. Tolkien hated industry. He hated machines. He hated the Industrial Revolution. He hated things of metal and industry, and he is a veteran of World War I and witnessed these new advanced ways of killing people like the tank and the flamethrower and mustard gas and all these like new industrious ways to like snuff out life. And he didn't like it. What most of the world called progress, which is like technological advancement for their day and age, he thought was actually regression. And he thinks a simpler way of living, just appreciating, he's not a tree hugger by any means, but appreciating the beauty of nature and good tilled earth as Bilbo does, and like having a nice little cottage in the woods and just being in peace and having a relationship with nature.
Yeah.
That is a godly relationship. That is
like a going back to Eden.
A going back to Eden kind of relationship, not like an idolatrous, like climate, save the earth kind of a relationship to the earth, but like a good, godly, like dominion mindset of like, we are the rulers of this earth and we should appreciate it and enjoy it as it is.
Tending the
garden. And he says here in his way that like goblins and people like them are the source of all the industry and all the machinery and all the quote unquote progress that has actually brought so much evil and wickedness into the world. And that just gives you a little glimpse of Tolkien's view of things like the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
So
Tolkien, who was not shy to say his opinion loudly in the room.
Exactly.
And didn't shy away from saying what he really thought about something.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought that was interesting and just a little like, I wouldn't agree with every point of that. I think there's room for technological advancement that is good and helpful to humanity. And I'm sure he would say the same as well. But using technology to destroy and kill, that is something that Tolkien is very against, and we should be as well. So
I got another one. There's poetry strewn throughout the book.
Yes, talk about Tolkien,
definitely in the Lord of the Rings as well. And it's some of my favorite poetry. It's very sing-songy. I suppose it's an acquired taste. Some people don't like it. That's fine. You don't have to like it. It's, he's not Shakespeare, okay?
Yeah.
But his poetry is nice. I like it. I happen to.
Yeah.
So there's a famous poem, and I'll just read one stanza of it, and it repeats in the Lord of the Rings. And this is towards the end of my edition on page 269. The roads go ever on part, and so one stanza
I'm glad you're
says,
reading this because I wanted to read this as well.
Oh no, am I taking it? You got it.
No. I'm saying I was going to get to this, but I'm glad you're doing it.
Okay, well, I'll do it. So the last stanza reads, roads go ever on, under cloud and under star, yet feet that wandering have gone turn at last to home afar. Eyes that fire and sword have seen, and horror in the halls of stone, look at last on meadows green and trees and hills they've long known.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, so in the Lord of the Rings, it's slightly different. It's the road goes ever on and on.
Yeah.
So there's one. In the Hobbit, it's plural. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's describing in a very pastoral, romantic, capital R, romantic, like nature-filled, idealistic vision of a wanderer who goes on an adventure and sees horrible things, but is able to come back. It's like you go into the dark tunnel, but you come out the other side and live to love another day.
Yeah.
And it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I love it. You go down into the dark place, but you come back. So roads go on. So when you're in the dark tunnel, the road will go on. You will see the trees and hills and the familiar meadows again.
Yeah.
eyes that have seen horror will be restored.
Yeah.
The black nights of the soul will find a new dawn. There's hope. So that's what I get out of that. That these things in life that we go through are part of the road that we're on, and it's going to keep leading forward, and good will triumph.
Yes, I love that because within the story itself, that's Bilbo's interpretation of his adventure. That's Bilbo's reflection on the journey he's just gone through. And Gandalf even says, right after he says those lines, he's like, "My dear Bilbo," he said, "something is the matter with you. You are not the hobbit that you were." And it's true. Like Bilbo, so his reflection on that is that, like, it's good that I went through all these things. I have seen horrors, I've seen fire, I've seen death, I've seen sword, I've lived through a battle, and now I'm coming home.
Yes.
And I'm returning, and I'm better now for having gone on that journey. I can appreciate what I have, what I'm returning to now more for having gone on the journey that I just went on, which is not what he thought when he left his hobbit hole at the beginning. He's very hesitant and very hopeful that these dwarves will just leave him alone. He's very hoping that he will just stay there. And now he gets thrust into this adventure and he comes back and he's just like, I'm glad I went.
Yeah.
So many bad things happened, but I'm glad that I lived through them and that I now have the perspective that I have now. And Gandalf's like, it's funny because Gandalf is the one who started this whole thing. And he acts like he's surprised. This was his intention the whole time. For Bilbo.
I think he's teasing him a little bit, isn't he? He's like, "Oh, look at you! You're different! Wow!
Oh wow! Look who's all grown up!"
He's like probably winking at him, you know.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, we've talked for a long time about
an inordinate amount of time we've spent.
Irresponsible amount of time. Closing thoughts on The Hobbit.
I love The Hobbit. I have fond feelings in my heart for the book. I love the adventure. It's one of my all-time favorite books. If I have a list of 100 of my favorite reads, The Hobbit is on the top 5 at least. So I love his sentences. I love the style. I love the characters and everything. And I just, I have a feeling of fondness. When I knew we were going to talk about The Hobbit today, I just thought, everything will be all right. It's one of the good ones.
It's been fun to prepare for.
Yeah. It's a great book. Sean, what are your closing thoughts, The Hobbit?
Well, I think if you haven't read The Hobbit, you need to go pick it up and read it.
What are you going to do?
Now that you have all this knowledge, what are you going to do with it, listener? But I think, or if you have read The Hobbit, I hope that this has given you a deeper appreciation for it. And I hope that we have helped you kind of see the treasures that are hidden in its pages. And there are treasures hidden in this pages. Tolkien is a master wordsmith. He's a magician when it comes to writing. It is well worth your time to pick up this book and really just relish it. And I would even say, if you have kids, read it to your kids. Lord willing, when I have kids, I'm going to read it to my kids. And it is a great book to help frame for them what it means to live through an adventure and grow in the world that God has made. Well, Daniel, I think that's going to be it for us. Thank you for listening. Next time on episode 3, join us as we try to acquire a great fortune from orphan children.
We're going to get the fortune, don't worry.
We're going to get the fortune, don't worry.
Come back next week.
A story of tattoos and plays and books and
irresponsible bankers
and irresponsible perpetually ill bankers. Yeah. All right. Have a great time, everybody. Have a great life. We'll see you soon.
Goodbye.